Chris.
Hey, Jason. How are you?
I'm good, man. Welcome to the Leading and Serving podcast.
Yes. Welcome, and thanks for joining me this morning.
Man, the middle of summer.
Yes.
I was so disappointed. The high today, I think, is in the low 90s.
Yeah.
You know, and the humidity, I think, is in the high 150s or whatever. But
Well, and I mean, I guess I kind of wonder if people who don't have kids feel this tension too. Like,
I don't know.
just the summer tension.
Yeah.
Of trying to keep up with everybody's schedule
Right.
and trying to shift
How do we entertain in that type?
kids and like,
Right.
I was like,
Yeah.
I don't know that everybody else feels the tension I do, but maybe that's just me.
I don't feel any tension because we took our kids to a camp this week.
Oh,
So
fair
I'm
enough.
down a couple of kids this week, so I'm feeling pretty good this week.
That's good.
But I'm
happy for
disappointed
you.
because I heard that the morning started out chilly.
This
Like,
morning.
Yeah, like
Oh,
low 60s or upper 50s. I was like, what? I missed the rare morning in the Midwest that
I
was
was
chilly.
worried about my meeting this morning. I don't even know that I noticed
I know.
it.
I didn't get outside until it was already in the mid 70s. So
Oh,
it's probably going to be burning by the time we finish this. So
Right.
we should probably hustle up and
Hustle
move
up.
on. So
so what are we talking about today?
we are going to talk about a brand new tool that has come through Giant in the last 2 years.
Okay.
It was developed basically in the pandemic because everybody just kind of hit rock bottom in a sense
Yeah.
during COVID of going, I don't know what tomorrow brings because I thought this was a 6-week thing.
Right.
And then we thought, well, it's just a 3-month, year.
Right.
when does this end?
When does this stop?
You know, it really
are we
made-
done?
Well, we're still feeling effects of
I was
it,
going to
right?
say, at some level, like, I think I just saw a headline this morning saying that there was another variant or something like that. And I was like,
Right.
What? Are you
I mean, we're
serious?
going to have variants for years.
For years,
and
right?
You know, at some point, we'll be telling stories to your grandchildren, right?
Right.
But I think we're still seeing effects in.
And I just had a family member get sick with COVID.
Yeah.
Not too long
Yeah,
ago. And I
you
mean, it's not near to the degree that they initially thought. But it's just like, okay.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
It's just
I
part
mean,
of
it's still
part of our
affecting
world
the
now.
labor force. It's still affecting supply chain.
Oh, totally.
You know, there's just so much still affecting us. And then, you know, we've got all the economic uncertainty coming down the road. There's political, left and right polarization, and
Right.
good grief. There's just so much going on in our world that it's easy for us to get down
It is.
and to feel like the bottom's just dropping out
Right.
and I'm standing in the wrong spot.
Right.
And so this is a tool that was developed over the last couple of years. It's a really simple one. It's just called the Hope Meter
Okay.
of where's your hope at?
Mm-hmm.
So how hopeful are you today about your tomorrow
Okay.
is the main question. So it could be literally tomorrow, or it could be 6 months, a year, 10 years, 5 years, whatever down the road of how hopeful are you today about your tomorrow.
Right.
And so if you think about this tool like a speedometer, okay, 0 to 100, 100%, I am feeling fully hopeful that tomorrow is going to be amazing. 100%, you're just ecstatic.
Right.
Tomorrow's going to be great.
Right.
And then 0% is I am absolutely hopeless. There is no hope for tomorrow.
Oh, wow.
So 0 is there's nothing, 100% there's everything, right? In between, there's going to be, all these different stages of hope. And if you think about maybe 70% to 100% on that speedometer
Yeah.
being kind of your green zone,
Okay.
that from 70% up, you're feeling optimistic. Maybe you're feeling really excited, or maybe you're just feeling ecstatic over the top, okay? So that green zone kind of has a scale of how excited you are. But if you think at the top of the speedometer, some say 40% to 70%, we can call that like the yellow zone. Okay. That the yellow zone at its worst, at that 40%, just might be, man, I'm really struggling. I know there's some hope for tomorrow, but I'm having a really hard time seeing it. Or maybe a little bit higher on that yellow zone, you're feeling stuck. I know there's hope, but man, I've got this big barrier I got to get over.
Right.
There's an obstacle in the way.
Right.
And then, closer to that 60, 70%, you're like, tomorrow's going to be fine. I'm just kind of okay. I'm just okay about the future.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily feel stuck. I don't necessarily feel like I'm struggling, but I'm not excited yet.
Right.
But I'm not pessimistic.
Right.
But then the whole left side of the speedometer, from 40% and down, right?
Yeah.
That is your red zone of feeling I'm feeling burned out. You know, that I'm not just struggling,
Right.
I'm feeling burned out.
Right.
You know, or now I'm just feeling downright miserable. Or miserable leads to I'm just feeling downright defeated. I don't know where the hope is for tomorrow. I feel like I've already lost. Tomorrow's already lost.
Right.
And then you just flat out feel hopeless and your hope meter is empty. And so if you're in that red area, man, reach out to somebody.
For sure.
Find some help. Find somebody to listen or to talk to that will just listen to you and let you kind of work through some of these things that are pulling you into that zone in that area.
Especially if you're, a business owner as well.
Yeah.
That you've got people that are pulling on you as well.
Right.
You need to be able to have an outlet.
Yeah, you have a responsibility to those you've hired, and you're kind of stewarding people as well at that moment. And
Right.
so, as a leader, you've got to reach out, find some coaching, find some therapy. I mean, having a therapist is not a mark of shame.
No, it
at
is
all.
not. Right.
If how many reports are out there of top leaders, people who we probably idolize in our culture,
Right.
Do regular work with therapists and coaching. They have life coaches.
Yeah,
They
there's-
have
there's
business coaches.
multiple
They have
levels.
emotional coaches. They have tons of coaches. Maybe that's why they're successful.
Right.
Is that they don't let that label themselves.
Right.
And so please reach out, find some help in that. But yeah, if you're feeling in that yellow or green zone, just that there is hope for tomorrow. I see something good coming down the road. I don't get it today, but I'm optimistic about the future.
Right.
And so where are you at on the scale? What are you feeling about today? And I think we're going to jump into kind of a topic around that today here in a little bit of, the future's uncertain, but there's some opportunities ahead. And so where do I fit on this?
Right.
And I think a couple of things for us to think about and look into with this is looking at the individual parts of our lives. So, there might be some things in your life that you're like, oh, I'm totally green on.
Yeah.
That is, I'm optimistic, I'm excited. But then there might be some other things you're like, oh my goodness.
Right.
I don't know what's going to happen here,
Yeah.
And that could be business. It could be private. It could be family. It could be friends. It could be any aspect of your life. Because if you go back and listen to one of our previous episodes on the Peace Index.
Yes.
Of talking about those different areas of your life.
I've really enjoyed that.
One of those areas can pull you down.
Yeah, and they can throw the scale off on the rest of
Yeah.
the areas, right?
Right.
So you can be in such a negative or a hurting spot in one of those areas that it can throw off your meter for the rest of the areas because it just takes so much energy from you.
Right.
But not that it's bad. It's just recognize it for what it is, right?
Yeah.
So recognize that point, that area of your life, you need some little help, and it's okay.
Yeah.
Ask for help.
Yeah. Because where we're at on this hope meter probably is a little bit of a measure of our capacity. That if you are in that green zone, you're probably ready for more.
And I feel like we've talked about capacity a lot lately, but it is definitely a real thing.
100%. Yeah.
And as a good leader, we need to recognize that we have a capacity. Like, we're not built to run 110 things at once.
Right.
We are people, and we do have multifaceted parts of our, of us, family, business, and things like that. So it's recognizing it is. And then the people that we lead also have a capacity.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, speaking of the people you lead, ask them about their hope.
Right.
How hopeful are you about your tomorrow?
Right.
And, because hope is related to that energy. It's related to that capacity that if you're on the yellow to red side of things, it takes energy to feel struggling when you're struggling. It takes energy to feel miserable.
Yeah.
And that's sucking the energy away from your ability to move forward. And so, talk to people and find out where they're at and see what we can do to overcome some of the barriers and some of the obstacles to help our hope meter
Right.
move to the green.
Right.
Move in. So, yeah.
Yeah.
So, simple tool, just
It
a
is.
simple question about how hopeful are you today about your tomorrow.
Yeah. But a great way to segue into maybe recognizing some areas of need or areas of, hey, this is why this is off.
Right. Right. Because we're gonna talk about what tomorrow might look like in terms of business ownership.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I'm just going to say I'm thinking about tomorrow. I would probably go into at least into the green side, that I'm optimistic about tomorrow. I think I've definitely got concerns. I've definitely got some thoughts of there's going to be some struggles.
Yep.
But I think I feel like I can see past those to there is an optimistic outlook for the future.
Right.
And I don't know that it's going to get better before it gets worse.
Right. Right.
There's probably some there's probably some spaces that we're gonna feel it a lot harder than we are today.
Right.
But I think there's good on the end.
Yeah, I agree.
So,
and
okay.
I'll be honest with you, I'm probably in the same predicament from a business perspective. I'm optimistic about what the future can hold, and I know that there is going to be some hiccups. However, my optimism has not got me to the point where even knowing that those hiccups are going to be there, I don't think it's going to shift us, but I don't think it's going to, it's going to make us stronger in the process.
Yeah.
I don't feel like it's going to kill the business sector at all by any stretch, because at some level you always need that.
Right. Right. But I think what catches me though is that thinking about the future, sure, I'm feeling toward the green for sure.
Right.
But I know I've allowed myself personally to get closer to that yellow-red border and that struggling to burnout phase of just exhausted and, you know, and so when things turn optimistic, what am I doing internally to be ready for that?
Right.
And so, I'm constantly fighting in myself against both sides of this. And so, investing in ourselves, in our own leadership and our own capacity so that we can take advantage of opportunities. I think that's what we're talking about. So,
well, and I'm so glad that you brought that up, because I think that I'm struggling perspective on some of my things that because of my inability to stay, what's the word I'm looking for? Manage some of my materials well, so that therefore I can't keep track of them as well. So I know there's some things that I need to clean up so that I can get out of the struggling stuck phase.
Right.
And I recognize that for what it is. And I know it's probably dragging other areas in my life down because of the fact that I've not put the energy towards it.
Yeah. So
I am hoping to hit a reset here soon.
There you go.
To help build that back up some more so that I can be more knowing it's taking capacity in my brain that shouldn't be.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. 100%. So. I'm with you on that. All right. Well, we're going to make a jump over to talking more about the future.
Yeah.
And in the face of uncertainty, we're seeing opportunities rise in terms of business ownership and things like that. So you ready to go do that here in a minute?
Into it.
All right, let's go.
Jason, I always enjoy talking about new topics with you. So I have one that I would love to chat with you about.
Bring it. Let's do it.
I know this is a deep dive, and I know we've done quite a few of those, but this is another one that's kind of popped up. We are in 2022, right? And it is...
Last time I checked.
Right.
Safely arrived.
And this podcast is going to go out in 2022. So
that's right.
We don't have to worry about that part.
There you go.
So more than likely, even if this drops in a couple of weeks, the economy situation that everybody's been speculating about since for like the last 6 months to a year, right? Knowing that there's some shifting going on with the expenses of things going up. And a lot of businesses have struggled with trying to figure out what their cost factors are so they can try to stay alive, as well as some of them have flourished like crazy because of it too. So it's just been all over the board. There's been different programs to try to help keep businesses alive in the midst of COVID and all those kind of things. But all that coming to a head in 2022, I am starting to see different opportunities that are opening up. And it sounds crazy because in the midst of what potentially some would say is an economic crisis, and some would say an economic shift, or even if we know that we are walking into different times that we've probably not been in before. Many people reference back to different presidents who've had inflation and stuff like that, where it's significantly shifted the economy and the ability for people to buy and sell things at different levels, right?
Yeah.
So I am seeing some different business owners who are potentially thinking about selling.
Okay.
And so what I want to chat with you about today is what makes you think that this is a good time to buy a business. Let me take a step back too, because if you're a reader, you've probably read the book called The Monk and the Merchant. And this book, in one point in the book, it talks about a gentleman talking to a person who is hugely influential, and he is hesitant to converse with this person, and his mentor says to him, "Be bold in front of men, and meek in front of God." And so I don't know that that's perfectly stated, but this is the gist of it. Okay, so in the midst of this transition, during this time of maybe unrest for some and hesitation for some, is this a good time to be bold in front of men to potentially take on a new business?
Right.
And I would like to tease that out with you, because I think it's a viable conversation. And honestly, I'll be completely honest with you, I am thinking about purchasing another business.
Okay.
And so not that that's relevant to, or completely relevant to the podcast, but when's a good time to, I mean, if the economy was booming, it'd be a lot and I even find myself hesitating. If the economy is booming and you potentially could pick up a business, and you can make money, then yes, it's a lot easier to make that that decision, right?
Right.
But just like everything, trying to see in the future or trying to speculate what's coming down the pipe, it is not easy, and therefore we need to have a conversation of what we think is there or what we think is happening versus what is going to happen. So we obviously have to set a precedent of what we think is going to happen and therefore build back from that.
Because we have no crystal ball, but...
Right. So, and the funny thing is I'm working with a friend of mine who is potentially selling his business as well, and he and I are such good friends that it's been an interesting conversation to try to have with him, knowing that at some level that I might be interested in that business. So it's like, but being very leader driven in the fact that I'm trying to help him sell his business, but I also might be interested in buying his business, right? So it's like, well, if it's kind of a catch-22. So
I think all of our problems would be solved if we just went to the store and got one of those magic 8 balls.
Right. Or we get one of those time machines from Back in the Future.
That's right. I think one of my first thoughts, and I know this doesn't answer your question directly, but for me, it's the backstory.
Right.
We've talked a little bit on the podcast about the Great Resignation.
Right.
And even I've seen news reports again recently about how many top-level CEOs have shifted in major corporations, major companies. Just, we're seeing it at all levels of the workforce, right? Mm-hmm. And so is some of this coming about because of that you can't just resign from a business you own and go find a new business, so at some point is this a heart check, on, not necessarily why this business owner is selling, but for you, of doing that same heart check of saying, do I really want to stay an entrepreneur, stay in that ownership seat, or, am I ready to just, go find a job and let somebody else deal with those headaches? Because ownership is not easy.
It is not.
So I think, just going back to some of the leadership tools that we talk about, of just knowing yourself to lead yourself, that, of doing that hard work of really being introspective and not just seeing. So I think that's the first thing I would say is, yes, there's a business for sale. It fits within your goals, your game plan. Right. The price is amazing.
Which that is true.
Like
it definitely has to fit in your goal plan, right?
Right.
Because if not, then you're outside of your wheelhouse, and it's not, even if it's a good deal, it's not necessarily a good fit.
Right. I mean, just because a theme park is for sale doesn't mean you need to own a bunch of roller coasters.
Right, exactly.
As cool as that would be. Unless that's your wheelhouse, right? So, so I think that's work number one of thinking through, is this just a shiny offer of, it gets your adrenaline rolling, or is this something that really could be advantageous? And so I think that's the first bit of work that we need to do. But
and truly, like, so the, with every business, right, there's many a times that I've heard that people often value their business has value when you have your profit margin for each year times like 3 to 5 years as ballpark is where kind of seems like the going rate is. Now that might be the going rate of what you think it's worth, but it might not necessarily mean that somebody's willing to pay that for it, right? So, and then what assets go with it, and then on top of that, are you a solopreneur? Because if you're a solopreneur and you are the one running it as well as, and all you have is a book of business, you don't have any employees.
Right.
At some level, I don't know about you, but if you look at some of these businesses, I am not looking to buy myself a job.
Right.
I've listened to a podcast a long time ago that was telling me, if you're buying a business and you're going to make $40,000 a year, or whatever the number is, and you've just basically bought yourself a job because you don't have enough money to bring in more people to help you, and so you quickly become just this guy that's and unless you're big, unless you can see the bigger picture and you can see outside of this rat in the wheel kind of thing, then you're just buying yourself a job. And how many times have you wanted to buy yourself a job? Like, there's no reason to go out and spend money to get yourself a job that pays $40,000 to $50,000.
Right.
Because right now, there is a line of employers that are more than willing to pay you that $40,000 to $50,000 job.
Right.
And all you have to do
is walk
is
away at night.
Right. And all you have to do is work 40 hours so we can be done. Like, now, I get it. Like, not everybody's wired that way. I get that too. So, but recognizing that in the midst of this is also real.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. You and I talk a lot off air about working in the job, working versus working on the job, or working in the business versus working on the business. And I think that's something that you have to evaluate about the new opportunity is what would be required from day one.
Right.
If, like you said, if they're, maybe their business has shrunk a little bit because they're trying to get out, and that would be absolutely normal and understandable. And they're only putting 20 to 30 hours a week in. Well, as soon as you buy it, that's yours.
Right.
Those hours are yours. And if you're already sitting at 40 going, I can absorb that.
Right.
But you got to grow it.
Right.
How do you grow it? What bandwidth do you have to grow it with?
So that's 20 turned into 40. Like, and now you're running 2 80-hour, you're running 2 jobs. So you're basically running at 80 hours. Right.
And, but if, if I grow it, then I can hire somebody to take those 40 hours. But you still have to grow it to get it to that, to be able to afford that, And
how many business owners do you know that have done that, where they've taken on what was originally started at 20 hours, turned into 40 hours because they were trying to build the business, and got an increase in pay?
I think this may uncover a characteristic of entrepreneurs.
Yes. I don't think
who are overly optimistic.
Right. So so the answer to that question is none. Like, I mean, it's got to be, I mean, maybe there's some out there. It's the random few. But 9 times out of 10, you don't buy the business and grow it and immediately get an income increase. Like, it just doesn't happen.
Right.
It's all the bigger
and I'm
picture.
thinking about, your passion for your business, Chris, is dwindling, right? And it's taking you 30 hours to do what you do. And, well, I could easily do that in 20.
Right.
That's another optimistic look that we take,
Right, yeah.
Like, oh, I've got more energy. I've got systems. I've got blah, 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 whatever.
Right.
But I think.
And there's is some level of that, right? When you're analyzing a potential opportunity, you can say, you know what, I can outsource some of this stuff to people who are on my staff already and utilize that differently. So yes, at that point, it looks a little different, but most people don't have that already going for them.
Right.
And most people don't have those systems in place that's got them to the point where they're currently at versus where they're going to potentially go. And many times they can't afford to bring in some staff during that. So they're doing all the work. The entrepreneur is.
And at some point, if you're thinking, I'm going to buy the business and I'm going to hire somebody kind of at the same time to hire somebody to run that business. That is a risky endeavor too.
It is.
Because you don't, and so that opens up then another conversation that I always love is, are you building other leaders up around you?
Right.
Are you investing in people? Maybe they're working on one of your other businesses, or maybe they're working. Is this a relationship that you've been developing, that you know their character, you know their integrity, you know their work ethic, where they stand, and beyond a shadow of a doubt, this person could take this to the next level because I've been investing in their leadership capacity.
Right.
Rather than, throwing a job offer out on Indeed or,
right.
Or something like that and just, hoping for a good hire. So if you're thinking about buying a business tomorrow, who are you investing in today?
Right.
That I think would be a very critical question for me.
Good call.
Does that make sense?
About that.
Yeah.
It's funny. Like, I immediately think of numbers. It's interesting that you went to the leadership side of things, which I think is both. They're both viable. They're both huge issues.
Right.
But I think it's interesting that you went there. That's great.
Yeah, because especially if you're thinking, I'm buying this business so that I can work on the business.
Right.
If you want to be involved in the daily, then the leadership question would be more, how are you preparing yourself for that?
Right.
But if you're looking to buy a business so that you hire somebody to run it for you, how are you investing in that leadership today?
Right.
When
I don't know if I told you this or not, but when I was younger, my grandparents used to own a campground. And over the weekend, we went to a campground that the owners were part of. But they had so many employees because they couldn't do it all. They had so many different programs that were running inside the campground that there's no way a couple who owned this business could do it all. So they had hired a lot of teenagers, college kids as well as high school kids, that were just great employees. And they were, I even heard the boss say to one of the gals, well, tomorrow when you come in, we'll take a look at the schedule and see what you think about it and see if it's any, see what's the best, if it's the best answer for the week.
Right.
And I was like, wow, like that is definitely leadership growing capacity. Like you don't usually walk in. Usually the person who's doing scheduling goes, this is what it is. It is what it is. Like, you know what I mean? I don't know how many companies I've worked at where it was like, no, you can't have off on that day. You have to work that day.
Right.
Like, well, I have this going on. How do I get around it? You can't. You have to work.
Right.
Like there was no, not that. So it is definitely a leadership growth thing where you need to recognize
and if you're thinking about selling,
right,
maybe the person who takes over your business is someone you already know
in-house.
So are you building up leaders that you could even offer, to take over the business, and this scale down effect of your leadership with theirs increasing, yours decreasing over time, and ownership is handed over, and that's a do you have the bandwidth for that, or are you just done?
Right.
And I think that's another question that we should ask too is how often we stay too long. That sometimes we hold on to something thinking, we have this emotional and mental pull of, whether I should or I shouldn't.
Right.
And I think a lot of times we stay too long.
Yeah.
We just stick around a little too long. And
it's kind of like the initial hiring. I think oftentimes we hire too late.
Yeah.
Like how many times have you heard a business owner be like, I should have hired that person like 6 months ago or a year ago.
Right.
Like,
yeah,
it took so much off my plate and I'm so much less stressed. Right. And one of my mentors has told me multiple times, if you hire somebody, they should make your life easier.
Right.
And it should, because they're taking hours out of your day that they're taking the project on and you don't have to.
Right. And if they don't make your life easier, you hired the wrong person.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, then it goes back to leadership, right? At some level. So,
yeah. 100%. Yeah. So going back, you said your mind initially goes to finances.
Yeah.
And I think we can combine that with the optimism conversation too of, when you're looking at this business, you're looking at the potential profit, the potential sales, the overhead, blah, blah, blah. We tend to run optimistic projections, right?
Right.
That we're like, oh man, it's not 40 a year, it's 140 a year.
Right.
But like you said, we're heading into uncertain times. We don't know where we're headed. And so, I know as I've looked at a couple different business opportunities, I've run multiple projections. Like, here's a best day. Like, we're on all cylinders and our overhead is lean and mean. How do we, what could be, and I want to look at that projection going, oh yeah,
right.
I want to start yesterday.
Right.
But then, run a moderate projection of, okay, if, we're not going to be able to be at 100% capacity, effectiveness every day.
Right. There's
So,
no way.
So let's run this at 90%, 80, 75% capacity. And then on the other end, I'll look at worst case scenario.
Right.
What if our overhead is through the roof? What if sales are about as slow as I could ever imagine them being?
Right.
What would that look like?
Right.
And to see all aspects of that and, is that still worth taking on at that point?
Right. Yeah. And I think you definitely have to play out the worst case scenario, because I think if you don't, then you can't prepare for it.
Right.
But I've also listened to several books where they talk about, because oftentimes, I don't know about you, but like every time I look at a business, I think of worst case scenario. I want to know, like, what's the bare minimum we have to do to make sure that our expectations are met, or our financial obligations are met, right?
Right.
So there's something totally there about that. But there's also, I read a book that was talking about planning for success, and they were talking about that. Like, they had planned so much for what was the worst case scenario that they forgot to plan for what if they took off.
Right.
And I think that was the case. And then they took off and they weren't sure what to do. And it just became this problem of, well, how do we best move forward? Because we planned so much for the what if,
Right.
If the rapture happens versus, well, if we take off and everything goes, well, I guess that rapture is the wrong thing. But if it goes, terribly south versus, just growing like crazy, then it is what it is. And I was like, oh my goodness, like, I find myself preparing for the worst, and hoping for the best. Right, that's my entrepreneurial spirit diving in there. Right, but I also know that in my head, dealing with the worst case scenario is better for me, because then it helps prep me for worst. Like, okay, this is what's going to happen if we have to go down this road.
Right. If you always keep the bar low. If you plan for the mediocre or the worst, then when you exceed it, you're like, oh, that's great.
Right. But
that's nice. But
but I also think that now that I'm, as I get further along in my entrepreneurial journey, which, that's short and sweet. But I think there is a level of, hey, you do have to plan for what if this takes off? Like, because I'm in situations now where I would have never expected to be when I first started my entrepreneurial journey. You know what I mean? So it's like, and don't get me wrong, I've worked really hard on trying to make sure that leadership is become a thing for me, because I want to make sure I'm leading as best as I can possibly do, because I want to see the people around me excel. I want to see them excel and me excel as well. You know what I mean?
Right.
The best for everybody.
Yeah. And so having the space, making space to think on these things.
Right.
Which means you've got to pull yourself out of that daily grind and think on these things. And you don't have to have the 50 step-by-step things that would have to happen should our business take off.
Right.
But think through, what are the 5 milestone changes?
Right.
These 5 things, I don't know how they would work yet, but we would have to tackle these 5 things if we went through the roof.
Right.
But also probably think that through the other way as well of, if things really go south, what changes would I have to make?
Right.
And
there's, I know, like before we ever started this podcast, like I was dealing with EOS.
The entrepreneurial operating system.
Correct. Yeah. And it's significantly helped me break down what steps I needed to walk through before you and I ever talked about, exANIMO and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But, and that's helped me get to a better spot currently than I think if I had not done it, if that makes sense. Like I've had friends that said, I can't believe you did that. Just because maybe it was just time intensive or cost factor was a thing. But now that I've been through this and have gone through those steps and have some level of accountability with my team, it's great.
Yeah.
It's a good spot to be in.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think we've covered over quite a bit of these opportunities, but when you're out there and you're thinking about if we've got people listening, I'm sure that there's opportunities that are knocking on the door, whether it's in at one point in the market, there was times where nobody figured they could buy a house. But yet I know a guy who bought 5 houses in 1 year and they were for stupid low prices.
Right.
Like, so there's opportunities out there if you're looking for them. You just need to start looking for them. Right. So, and recognize that in the midst of these opportunities, what I'm also realizing is that not every one's an opportunity for me. And my wife would tell me that I probably jump on too many, but I also know that there's certain things about certain businesses that I really enjoy, and I just as soon try it. And I've always wanted to be able to do that. I wanted to be able to try something new in a new space.
So where does somebody look for opportunity?
You don't
just go to Craigslist and get on the one ads, right? Facebook Marketplace. And
well, and when I first started in the home buying business, right, I had a friend of mine that said, you need to tell everybody what you do. And I was like, no way. Like you need to tell people I buy houses. And I'm like, but I can only afford so many. Like, you know what I mean? Like but it has truly been, the crazy part is what we don't realize in the midst of that is if you tell 10 people that you buy houses, okay, or tell them that you buy businesses, like, hey, I buy businesses.
Right.
If you're selling yours, let me know. 9 out of those 10 people will probably never call you.
Right.
But there's one that might be in the midst of a transition or might know somebody who might be in a transition that they're going to call you and be like, hey, do you have any interest in this?
Right.
And not that you need to pull the trigger on every one of them, but maybe it's an opportunity to go. And maybe what I also always enjoy about this is that at each one of those opportunities, I feel like I learned something new.
Right.
So it might be a business I know nothing about, but I can work with the numbers and try to figure out if it's a viable thing that I might be interested in. And then I can do some research on the other situation or ask other people that I know, mentors, business owners, just stuff like that. Hey, is this something that you have a need for? Because at one point, earlier this year, I started taking a class and was thinking about buying a business that was going to help me because I needed it. I'm not sure that I'm going to do that anymore. And I actually have a quality person in place that I don't need to replace that person. Right. Has been very good to me and very helpful to me in my businesses. Right. So I don't know that I need to add another business where he has done an excellent job in that space and I don't have to manage it.
There you go.
So it was a capacity thing early on, what I realized. Now, and in the midst of that, I kind of reached out to people that I knew, said, hey, do you have any need for this service?
Right.
And then they would tell me yes or no. And some of them had quality people already in their space. They didn't need a new one.
Right. Right.
And that's okay. And that's good. But it also helped me recognize that, you know what, the people that I know that are in business might not need that as bad.
Right.
So maybe there's something else out there that's a better fit for me.
Yeah.
So
yeah, you're looking for the untapped need, not
right.
Yeah, not
And
the one that's already saturated in the market. Yeah.
Right. And sometimes there's also a conversation where, it says, well, I use so-and-so, but they're da-da-da-da. Whether
Right,
they're too
right.
high, whether they don't do a quality job or whatever like that. That's
Right.
concern,
Mm-hmm.
then, okay, there's a potential for change there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
each opportunity seems like to me is a growth point.
Yeah.
And whether I
Yeah.
purchase it or not, I get to learn something in the midst of that. And that's what really gets
Right.
me excited.
Right.
Because I enjoy learning. I enjoy learning about stuff I
Absolutely.
know nothing about.
Right.
And houses, when I first started, I had done a lot of research on houses. I had been in the construction industry.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to learn a lot. But it was out of my comfort zone because I've never had purchased homes based on a business level. It's always been, prior to that, had always been, well, I just need a house to live in.
Right.
And I thought it was the right investment for me and my family.
Right.
So now people know I buy houses,
Mm-hmm.
and I still have some people randomly come from my past that I know me that say, hey, are you interested in buying this home?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that if you tell people, sorry, long story short, or longer, if you tell people what you're doing or ask people around you, hey, do you have a need for this? Or,
Right.
So that's one avenue that you can get leads from.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I think another avenue is tapping into the local commerce, some of the,
Right. your chamber.
and stuff
yeah.
like that. Like they have meetings for stuff like where there's people in those businesses that are trying to find opportunities or trying to find ways to sell their business.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe they just, there's many people that start their business and realize quickly that, you know what, I'm just not enjoying this. I'm going to go back to what I was doing before. I'm 40 hours a week and I don't have to worry about it at night.
Right.
Right. And then there's people like me who like to think
prefer not to sleep.
Right. who decide to take on those headaches and keep going.
Right.
And then add more.
Yeah.
And so, there's always those opportunities. There's also small groups that are all in many communities have not quite B&I systems.
Right. But
there's
networking groups.
And stuff like that where you never know where somebody, you might bump into a business owner who's, I'd like to retire. Like we have a shift, and that's another thing as far as opportunities are concerned. We have a shift coming with the baby boomers who many of them own businesses, and if they haven't handed off to their kids, if their kids don't want involvement in their business, then it's an opportunity for somebody else because they don't want to just walk away.
They see that as part of their legacy. And
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And at some level, there's a value there that they would like to recoup, and they would also like to be, at some level, for many business owners, I think it's also hey, good job.
Right.
I'm going to pay you this amount of money for your business because you've done an excellent job at stewarding it.
Mm-hmm.
I talked to a business owner not too long ago who started it was him by himself, and has grown to the point now where he has like 130 employees, something like that. It's like, and so I think that for people that it might potentially want to be done and enjoy life and not quit thinking about things at night,
right?
But
selling the business is part of the retirement plan too. Yeah.
It could be, you know what I mean, and also recognize that there's a lot of businesses out there. I didn't know this when I was younger, but there's a lot of businesses out there. You set up a payment plan, structure plan with the business owner, because sometimes some of these businesses you can't go get an SBA loan for.
Okay.
Because some of these businesses they're so small that they kind of look like just an employee, like a job.
Okay.
From a business perspective, like you can't go, if I'm a sole owner of a business and I'm doing it, I'm getting paid myself $40,000 a year. I have a book of business, and maybe I have a van or a truck, whatever it is,
right,
to do my job. well, you have an asset and you have a book of business. Well, you don't have a whole lot. So really buying that business makes it a really difficult.
So you can put basically a down payment on the business and then pay out over time to that owner.
Yeah, depending on the business and depending on how the business owner wants to structure it, you
Right.
can, you've got to be able to. It's a give and take, and sometimes,
And that's probably for your smaller businesses,
right? And
Right.
sometimes those smaller businesses don't want to, or the owner might not want to do that. Maybe they just want a lump chunk and to get out.
Right.
And there's a lot of businesses I know, like even when my grandparents sold their business, they had to stay on for a little while.
Right.
To help the new
Right.
owner transition.
Absolutely.
Because it's not like there's a lot of people stepping out of different industries.
And they want to see it succeed.
Right. It's exactly
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So
It's good.
it's part of legacy. It goes back to the
Yeah.
legacy thing too.
Yeah.
I mean, I know insurance is very much that way.
Yeah. All right. So to kind of wrap up, I didn't necessarily take notes, but
Right.
if you're thinking about buying a business, there's certainly some ways to go about discovering. So talk to your local chamber. Just ask around. Be
Ask
bold.
around. Be
Ask
bold.
around. Just find somebody who's connected in the community, and just kind of drop the hint that, hey, I'd be interested in this, and
Yes.
see what develops.
And especially if you're already involved in your community, I feel like it's
Yeah.
a lot easier for it to come your
Absolutely.
way because people know you.
Absolutely.
So,
And so we talked about don't being overly optimistic.
yes.
Whether that's with time and
Or finances.
potential income. Always look at both ends of the coin. Both ends of the coin. Both sides. So whatever that cliche
Yep.
is,
Sounds
look
good.
at something on both perspectives. Yeah, and think about leadership. Think about who you're investing in, who's going to run this, how this is going to work, bandwidth, a lot of
Capacity.
good stuff. So
Yeah.
that was good, man.
Yeah.
That was good.
Thanks for hanging out.
Yeah,
Thanks
you too,
for
man.
Wrapping
This
this.
is,
This is one of those things that I think it's on a lot of people's minds.
Yeah, and it makes sense that if going back to the Great Resignation, if CEOs to your labor jobs are switching careers and
Yep.
jumping ship and going to something different or early retirement, it would make sense that business owners would be a little bit slower on that because it is such a hard challenge
Yeah.
to sell a business. And so maybe we're seeing the early days of a trend on that,
Right.
of business owners making that shift and change. So this has been good.
This
I've enjoyed
is.
it. So, hey, thanks for listening in. Give us a like or
Give us a like.
comment, subscribe.
Send us an email. Let
Please
us know
do.
what you think.
Yeah, if you know business for sale, let us know. We'll
Right? We'll pass it along.
yeah, or Chris will say, "I'll look at the opportunity."
Right. Then there's that.
But yeah, you guys are great. Hope you're having a great summer, and just keep on serving, keep on leading.
Sounds good.
Catch you next time.
Bye.